Okay, so some jabroni dropped a 112-page PowerPoint presentation on the current state of Square Enix, entitled That Excitement Once Again. I was tagged on Twitter about this, funnily enough, and apparently, according to PC Gamer, this presentation comes from one of its shareholders in regards to Square Enix. Square Enix has had a rough couple of years, combining $140 million in losses from abandoned projects. Oh. Hello, everybody. It's your boy Jmulls, and I think it's time to check this out. It was never just entertainment. What Square Enix once brought to life was a culture that shaped an era and an industry that fascinated the world. While that does read a bit dramatic, it's not entirely wrong. Square Enix IPs are some of the most beloved in the entire world, like Final Fantasy, like Dragon Quest, like Kingdom Hearts. And while they may appeal to a more niche audience, some of its smaller franchises also appeal just as much to quite a few people. Stuff like Bravely Default, Octopath Traveler. If it is one thing that Square Enix is not struggling with, its IP. But today, is Square Enix really giving birth to something genuinely new? Or has Square Enix turned away from the challenges before it and let its steps falter? That is not how I would frame the modern issues with Square Enix. Their bigger problem, in my opinion, is not trying to do something new. It's for their big series, namely Final Fantasy here. There's just no identity, gameplay-wise anymore. And when it comes to Dragon Quest, they're only doing pretty much remakes and remasters, and we haven't seen Dragon Quest XII since its first initial unveiling, which was basically nothing to begin with. And then Final Fantasy suffered for the longest time from an inconsistent gameplay vision combined with a weird over-reliance on exclusivity. We know this. For Square Enix, every challenge has always been a chance, not the rapper. The power to overcome countless obstacles and bring forth works that felt like miracles into the world. I think it's fair to say the person who wrote this presentation is very passionate about Square Enix overall. This doesn't feel as if it comes from only a money angle. You wouldn't use wording like this if it was just about the money. Once again, surprise us, move us, and ignite that passion we once felt, for gamers across the globe have been waiting endlessly for that irreplaceable experience. Square Enix still puts out a lot of really good games. I think where a lot of the resentment and animosity comes from is a combination of how they treat some of their more like forgotten IPs, how they seemingly ignore very obvious things to do, like a Final Fantasy IX remake we just never got, anything involving Chrono Trigger, that one still could be to be determined though, and how they just take so long to go from announcing something for it to come out for a couple of their key games like Dragon Quest XII, Kingdom Hearts 4, back in the day Kingdom Hearts 3. And when it comes to Final Fantasy, we've gone from an era of Final Fantasy way back in the day, where they were consistently putting out high quality, memorable experiences that stood the test of time for years to come, all the way to the modern day, yearly. Like, look at the release cadence for Final Fantasy in the late 90s and early 2000s. It was crazy. It was every year. And now we have to wait years and years between mainline numbered releases, and those mainline numbered releases feel and play so fundamentally different to one another. Okay, here's the money talk. I think I see what their strategy is with the construction of this presentation. It comes from the heart, but this presentation isn't necessarily meant for just the average consumer. It's meant to appeal to other shareholders to try and spur Square Enix into action. So a lot of this early addiction feels like a fan that is disheartened with the current state of Square Enix writing it. This is how they try to get other shareholders on their side, by appealing to the money. And look at the things they bold here, with a significant deterioration in earning power as evidenced by declines in operating income, return on equity, ROE, and other key performance metrics. In particular, the decline in operating income has been primarily driven by revenue contraction and persistently weak margins in both the HD game segment and the SD game segment. We submit that the fundamental revitalization of these businesses, encompassing both revenue growth and profitability enhancement, constitutes the most critical management challenge presently facing Square Enix. However, the current medium-term management plan appears to lack sufficient specificity in its measures to address these challenges, as well as in its KPIs, target setting, and execution roadmap. Consequently, we remain unconvinced that it can fundamentally resolve the underlying issues or deliver the maximization of corporate value. They're using a lot of shareholder buzzwords, that by saying, hey, these elements of pretty bad, that is meant to set off alarm bells in other investors and other shareholders. Accordingly, we respectfully urge a fundamental reassessment of the medium-term management plan with the objective of fully unlocking the potential of Square Enix's distinguished intellectual property and thereby maximizing corporate value. See the way they're wording this? It's not that they necessarily want to make a great game. They do, but in order to appeal to the other shareholders, they say, hey, if we do this and we actually make great games again, we can maximize corporate value. You gotta pay attention to how they word these things. Okay, the people that wrote this presentation know what they're doing. 100%. Look at this. This slide is basically telling other shareholders, look how popular our IP are. Look at how popular Final Fantasy is. Look how popular Dragon Quest is. Globally and also domestically here. Look at the cultural significance our IP has brought to the table, being featured in the Olympic Games in 2021. Look at what Square Enix used to do. How innovative a lot of these titles used to be. Even in just a 4-year stretch from 1997 to 2001, going from Final Fantasy VII to Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy VII brought to the table 3D characters, full motion video, cinematic storytelling, flexible combat customization, color-coded with one color to signify innovative elements. And then Final Fantasy X, full voice acting, 3D field, highly strategic battle system, and highly flexible development system. This is basically trying to tell shareholders what the authors of this presentation view to have been innovative elements for Final Fantasy way back in the day, what those games did right. And it's trying to put importance on those elements and those types of elements, specifically, I might add, combat and character customization. That's noted in both the Final Fantasy VII part and Final Fantasy X part, on top of visuals like full motion video, 3D field, 3D characters, cinematic storytelling. It's basically trying to tell and inform investors and shareholders, saying, hey, the reason these games made so much money back in the day and was so well and was so culturally relevant, it's largely because of these elements here. Then look at what they do. Brother, look at these plots. Look at these charts! This one stings. Square Enix's overseas sales ratio remains low compared to competitors, with growth likewise stagnating. Square Enix in blue right there. Oh, they're petty. Look at what they're doing here. They're putting the names and the faces of the presidents during each of their tenures and showing the growth rates. Trends in ROE, trends in operating income. Minus 32%, minus 61%. Write-offs of game development assets. Square Enix is here. Meow, like Arthur Cliff. Now we get to the heavy hitters. The decline in profit has stemmed from both a decrease in revenue and stagnating profit margins. Square Enix is the only player in the industry experiencing negative revenue growth, with an operating profit margin that remains at roughly half the level of its competitors. They know exactly what buttons to push. They know exactly who they're trying to appeal to. Again, it's not you and me. It's the other shareholders. Look how they color-coded this to being like red or light pink here. Just a highlight. Hey, Square Enix is like the only ones here. The decline in revenue has been driven by reduced sales in both the HD games and SD game segments. I like how they put a red circle around minus 17%, minus 5%. The stagnation in profit margins has resulted from declining margins in both the HD games and SD game segments. Bro, look how big the MMO segment is. I genuinely am curious what percentage of that MMO segment is Final Fantasy XI. You gotta imagine most of that's 14, but I'm morbidly curious. And you see what they're doing here? They're trying to convince the other shareholders that these negative numbers, these embarrassing numbers overall, are a result of this. The most critical management challenge Square Enix must address is the revenue decline and stagnating profit margins in the HD and SD game segment. They even put a red box around HD game and SD game in case you missed it. I know, you might need a magnifying glass. Bro, they're directly calling out management here. Look at this. Blink and you'll miss it. Top priority, management. Stagnation in revenue growth. If it's boxed in red, management challenges. Look at all the things boxed in red here. Fragmentation of the development portfolio. Deficiencies in platform selection. Deficiencies in product design, deficiencies in advertising and promotion, lagging sales of legacy titles from core IP, peak out of DQW, a major revenue contributor, underutilization of licensing out opportunities, lagging cross-media revenue, lagging merchandise revenue. Yeah, I absolutely believe lagging merchandise revenue. Every time they try to put out some new merchandise, I just wonder who it's for. It's either weirdly expensive and niche, or it's just a design I don't see anyone actually wanting. I remember when they had like camping gear or something, like, bro, what are we doing? It's like, yeah, maybe for like Final Fantasy 15, but this was a recent thing. Critical Management Challenge 2. The stagnation and profit margins of the HDSD games segments can be broken down into the following management issues. Red box, management challenges, excessive development costs, excessive other SG&A expenses, excessive development and operating costs, excessive platform fees. They do not like the state of management. My god. And again, this is all language meant to appeal to the other shareholders, because it's all money related. Maybe not every shareholder knows exactly why people love Final Fantasy or love Dragon Quest or love Kingdom Hearts, etc. But they know all of these elements. They know them in spades. Brother, we're only on slide 20. However, Square Enix's current medium-term management plan raises concerns as to whether it can effectively resolve these management challenges, an expression that appears to justify the neglect of critical management challenges, failure to present concrete measures for individual management challenges. This entire section is basically them just ragging on Square Enix's like reboot they keep talking about, and saying there's not enough of a plan, there's not enough communication to shareholders. Bro, read this! Square Enix's current medium-term management plan appears to justify its lackluster performance under the slogan reboots, while failing to articulate a forward-looking vision, an expression that appears to justify the neglect of critical management challenges. Jesus. I'm telling you, these people know what they're doing. Look at the wording here. Absence of a company-wide strategy, lack of commitment and transparency towards shareholders. These are some of the things shareholders hate the most. And if you want to get action at a company level, these are the people you have to convince. It's just, that is the truth. You have to convince them. This part's just them comparing Square Enix to Capcom in terms of what they actually disclose. And this is showing what Capcom actually discloses in comparison to Square Enix. Disclosure status of unit sales. Total company-wide unit sales by new titles, catalog titles. Capcom discloses, Square Enix doesn't. By package digital download and by region, both Capcom and Square Enix disclose. Unit sales by game title, by fiscal year and cumulative, Capcom does, Square Enix doesn't. And even here, they put down a little chart that Capcom shared showing the actual numbers. Under such inadequate disclosure practices, it becomes exceedingly difficult to accurately assess Square Enix's business performance. Bro, what is this comparison? The weak performance of new releases is evident from the sharp declining trend in series unit sales. In units of 10,000, Final Fantasy 15 was at 1,000 or 10 million, and Final Fantasy 16 is at 323 or 3.2 million. Dragon Quest 11, 7 million, down to 200 with Dragon Quest III Remake, and then they're comparing Monster Hunter X to World, Rise, and Wilds. But notice how they don't have a red arrow, by the way, going from World down to Rise, down to Wilds. Because again, it's all about the optics. They're showing shareholders, look at what the competition's doing, look at where they were in 2015. We were in an even better position. We've gone down in two of our biggest IPs with Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, whereas Monster Hunter is still higher than where they were in 2015 with Monster Hunter X. Now, those of us with two working brain cells would say it's a little bit stupid to compare Dragon Quest XI to Dragon Quest III freaking Remake, but they are trying to paint a narrative here. And it's not like they can compare it to Dragon Quest XII, they haven't released that freaking thing. Okay, I really like this part. They're calling out deliberately Square Enix's lack of investment in their core IP compared to competition. Mainly Capcom, that's their main comparison they've been doing here. But basically what they're doing here is saying, look at Capcom, they're investing more into their core IP than what we are doing over at Square Enix. Revenue returns on Square Enix's core IP development significantly lag behind competitors, minus 73%. Minus 50%. Jesus. Look at this! Deficiencies in platform selection. Square Enix's AAA titles are unreasonably limited in terms of supported platforms. I've been saying that for years. The exclusivity was always a mistake. Final Fantasy VII for Remake and Rebirth. Oh, so these are numbers based on 1 year after the title's release. The global install base of supported platforms, million units 1 year after title release. Okay, so Final Fantasy VII Remake was only on PS4 in that time. I see what they're doing. They're trying to say, look at PS4, look at PS5. We're releasing the game only on these platforms, so we're releasing our game to target a smaller pool of players than what Monster Hunter's doing. With World, it was released on PC, Xbox One, and PS4. So look at the total number of people this game could appeal to. Look at Monster Hunter Rise on Switch and PC. It's a giant, bigger pool of players compared to only releasing on the PS5, the PS4, or the PS4 and just like the Xbox One. This is not saying the number of units these games individually sold. That's not what this chart's saying. It's basically saying, look at the total population of people we are selling our game to, and we are limiting ourselves drastically by only being available on 1 or 2 platforms at a time compared to the competition. Whereas when the competition did with Monster Hunter Rise and they only were on 2 platforms, those platforms were both way bigger. Square Enix has recently, within like last year or so, talked about going multi-platform for pretty much everything, and then released Bravely Default only on the Switch too. Look, I love the game, but that was stupid as hell. But you're basically shooting yourself in the foot by only releasing on an individual platform like this. Oh, okay, so we're just going Scorched Earth. Bust out the flamethrower, we're going nuclear. Recently released core titles have been harshly criticized. So what they're trying to do here is, you may notice on slide 55, they're trying to attach a label as to why all these numbers suck to feedback that they're getting for these games. Now, my opinion, using Metacritic for anything serious is a fool's errand, but to be fair to them, they're not using the Metacritic score, because that's where I have my biggest issue with Metacritic. I think trying to aggregate review scores is one of the dumbest practices out there. Instead, they're just taking brief snippets from various reviews, I imagine. Dragon Quest III Remake, outdated and frustrating gameplay. Horrible! One of the absolute worst remakes ever. I just can't believe that this god-awful mess would be released in 2024. Random encounters every 3 or 4 steps. The ultra-fast speed is sluggish. Really long loading times. It's a very boring, irritating game. Final Fantasy XVI, low quality that betrays fan expectations. Christ. The turn-based and active time battle systems that fans love have been replaced. ... The music, which Final Fantasy is famous for, is replaced by generic orchestral cinematic fantasy strings the whole time. Alright, hold on there. I don't know what reviewer over the age of 80 put that down there, but the soundtrack was one of the best redeeming qualities of Final Fantasy XVI. Why Square Enix don't listen to fans remains the eternal question. Fair. All in all, Final Fantasy XVI is heartbreaking for Final Fantasy fans. Look, I think Final Fantasy XVI was a fine game, but I have my own issues with it. The more time passes, the more I dislike the combat system. It was really cool in the beginning, but then they just don't add interesting powers on top of it after a certain point. And the combat loop is far too focused on trying to pair together various icon abilities, and it leaves standard combos in the dust. And when you find certain really powerful combinations, it feels like the combat system is only designed around those systems. And I'm sorry, but like, Bahamut and Odin should have been 2 of the coolest icons you unlock in that game, and they're 2 of the most boring. And I think the game peaks around the halfway mark as well. And for a lot of core areas that people want and love from Final Fantasy, those tend to be 16's weakest elements, namely side content, the lack of a party, and character customization. Oh god, okay, new IPs have also been harshly criticized. Forspoken, a story devoid of charm or immersion, only worth $20 to $25 or skip it. Bad cringe dialogues, bad protagonist, unlikable characters, bad acting, bad pacing, and meh generic story. Bro, I called that game was gonna be garbage the moment I saw like the first trailer. The moment someone opened their mouth in a trailer in Forspoken, I knew that game was gonna be hot garbage. Babylon's Fall, oh Christ, we're bringing that one out. Monotonous and unrewarding gameplay, what a dull and boring game. The missions are repetitive and cumbersome. Combat feels clunky and unpolished. Marvel's Avengers, blatant inducement towards continuous microtransactions. Ooh, we're calling that out too. This game is so dull it lacks charm and personality. Must be from Ubisoft. The fact that it's a live service game really hurts the overall story. The missions are extremely repetitive and they end very abruptly, and there's a lot of grinding as if it's... Bro, who snagged these quotes? By the way, notice how Nier isn't here, by the way. Just notice that. And then here they're basically saying they pay way more for advertisement than what Capcom does. says, the revenue returns on Square Enix's advertising expenditures for new title launches significantly lag behind competitors. And look, I know what some people are going to say, not all of these comparisons are just. And that trying to put something like the Dragon Quest III remake and Final Fantasy 16 in the same breath is not understanding the scope and scale of both of those games. I get that. You probably get that. However, what they are trying to do as a shareholder for Square Enix is appeal to other shareholders. They don't care about the scale of the game. They don't care about how valid some of these comparisons might be for some people. What they care about is the end result, and they're basically using this to say, hey, there's something wrong with the way Square Enix plans and with the way they execute on developing games. That's what they're trying to showcase to other shareholders. This section is basically saying they can't sell mobile overseas. Approximately 7 years will have elapsed between the announcement of the strategic alliance with Tencent in 2018 and the release of Final Fantasy XIV Mobile. Underutilization of licensing out despite the high overseas awareness of Square Enix's IP. The failure to leverage it is problematic. Awareness of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest in North America generally exceeds that of competing RPGs. So Pokemon, duh, number one. Warcraft, then Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, then Diablo, then Elden Ring itself, then Monster Hunter, Baldur's Gate, Genshin Impact, and Shin Megami Tensei. Okay, Shin Megami Tensei includes the Persona series, right, because Persona was originally a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei. So this is basically to address any questions a shareholder might go and say, where it's like, hey, so maybe they just don't know about Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. Well, no, plenty of people in North America do, but you're still getting these crap numbers. Again, this is page 65. There's a giant section or two here about like poor merchandise, low profitability of the HD game business is attributable to persistently elevated costs across nearly all expense categories, basically saying they pay way more to develop games than the competition, inefficient advertising and promotion expenses. Square Enix's advertising expense ratio is higher than competitors and approximately 8 points above best practice peers. And the rest of this presentation is basically them going over various elements of the business and how they're problematic overall. Okay, so will this amount to anything? I think that's the key question for a lot of people here. I don't think this is swaying any of the general public, but it's also not meant to. And that's the key thing here. This presentation wasn't meant to win some kind of like internet war about the current state of Final Fantasy or which is better, old Final Fantasy or modern Final Fantasy or whatever. It's meant to be a call to action for the shareholders and say, look at the issues going on here. Look at how much better the competition's doing in pretty much every key area. Look at what people are saying about our game as well. Look at how inefficient we are running this business. We're not getting clear communication and disclosure from Square Enix. We need a better plan. It needs to be thought out. It needs to be communicated. And things need to change not only when it comes to game development, also when it comes to the actual business of Square Enix. That is basically what this presentation is for. It's to inform other shareholders of what's actually going on here. So while you and me may say it's a bit stupid to compare sales figures for Dragon Quest XI and Dragon Quest III Remake for Square Enix as a business, they haven't released Dragon Quest XII. So they're basically just showing, hey, look at the decline here. Regardless of where that decline comes from, look at this decline. That's basically what they're trying to show. Now, I quite like quite a few of the modern Square Enix titles, and I think some of the best work Square Enix does comes from a lot of those smaller titles. Heck, one of my most anticipated games for 2026 is The Adventures of Elliot. I played the demo for that game on the Switch. It's really dang good. I'm getting into Octopath. I'm really liking that franchise. I absolutely adored Bravely Default. And while I did really enjoy things like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and while I did have a pleasurable time with Final Fantasy XVI, were they perfect games? No. They are deeply flawed, and flaws in key areas that honestly shouldn't have existed. And I've been saying for a while now, Final Fantasy's biggest issue isn't necessarily that it's real-time combat or that it's turn-based. It's that it lacks a gameplay identity. Final Fantasy has been all about change. Sure, I'll agree with you on that. There's been some changes to the core formula and changes to the aesthetic of Final Fantasy over the years. Absolutely, without question. However, when you lack the identity associated with your franchise, and people don't know the type of game it's going to be when you announce a new game, Houston, we have a problem here. Because when you're trying to appeal to a wider demographic, when you're trying to appeal to a wider player base, if your name recognition means nothing and they don't know that type of game they're going to get out of you, you're not going to carry a giant new fan base from game to game. You're basically having to go back to square one and hoping some people stick around. On top of that, they take so freaking long to put out a new mainline entry, you can't capitalize on the momentum you build from one entry to the next. Because one, they're fundamentally different, aesthetically and also gameplay wise. They're basically entirely different IP. It's just you slap the Final Fantasy label on them, but it's not like that era in the late 90s and early 2000s where you were consistently pumping out great games. Now they're inconsistently released and they feel so different. It is a deeply flawed vision for Final Fantasy. And I think more often than not, Square Enix consistently makes some of the dumbest business decisions I have ever seen. I do not know how, I do not know why, I do not know who the idiot was that checked off the decision to release a more traditional remake of the Final Fantasy VII story as a gacha mobile game, but that level of idiocy blows me away. I think a lot of people would have way less issue with the remake trilogy if Square Enix put out alongside it a traditional remake of the original Final Fantasy VII. If you just had both, some people will say you're milking it, sure, but at least it doesn't feel as if you're necessarily shunning those who treasure that original experience and saying we're going to do a new thing. I don't have an issue with doing a new thing, but do it alongside a traditional remake. That makes a ton of sense to me, and I don't know why they don't do it. I don't know how we haven't gotten a remake of Final Fantasy IX yet. It's been so long. Maybe we end up getting it at some point. How we haven't gotten it yet, though, baffles my mind. I'm playing through Xenogears right now on the channel. How they have not done anything with that series blows me away. It's like, yeah, I know you don't have Monolith anymore. Bring the game back, though. What are we doing? It's amazing. They consistently make some of the most baffling business decisions that seem detached from reality. And these aren't just one-offs. I don't know why the heck Dragon Quest XII is seemingly in such development hell, but I don't know what else to ascribe to it for this long wait going from the announcement of Dragon Quest XII all those years ago to still not knowing anything about it. It's like, yeah, the HD 2D remakes for some of the older Dragon Quest games are cool. People want something new as well, though. This is why I say Square Enix is one of the most frustrating companies out there. They put out some of my favorite games, but they also make some of the dumbest decisions I have ever seen. How have we not gotten another Nier game yet? I mean, we'll get into that one in a bit. Square Enix has a lot of extremely talented people, and a lot of people there that know what they're doing. But I think it's fair to say that over the years, there have been a few key decisions that have been made that were the exact wrong decisions to make at that time. I think Final Fantasy needs to have a new gameplay identity. It needs to stop experimenting so much with different genres and completely different styles of play. Find an identity gameplay-wise and stick with it. Whether that is going back to turn-based or continuing with the combat system from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I don't personally mind which one you do, just pick one. And honestly, at this point in time, I kind of lean more towards going back to turn-based. There is no quick fix for Square Enix. That's the thing. Because it's not like they can just whip up a game in the style of an old school Final Fantasy game in like 2 weeks and just say, guys, guess who's back? Right? Like, that's just not feasible. Square Enix for a while at this point have been talking about their reboot. That presentation kind of lambasted it. But I'm personally not of the opinion that Square Enix only puts out bad games. I still quite enjoy the remake and rebirth games. I think they're really fun. Do they have issues? Absolutely. Are they flawed? Absolutely. Do I still think they're really enjoyable games and experiences, and am I looking forward to the third remake game? Absolutely. Did I enjoy Final Fantasy 16? Yes. Do I think it lived up to its full potential? Hell no. Do I think it would probably be better for Square Enix to stop trying to do crap like Forspoken, Babylon's Fall, and Marvel's Avengers? Yes. And I think they are going to stop doing crap like that, hopefully at least. My recommendation though, if you still crave those turn-based experiences, those giant turn-based RPGs that you probably fell in love with all those years ago, or even relatively recently when it comes to those older Final Fantasy and possibly even Dragon Quest games, check out some of Square Enix's other series, like Octopath Traveler. If you haven't played Bravely Default, highly recommend it. It's one of the best job and combat systems I've ever seen in a turn-based game. Do I think those series existing necessarily justifies the issues of Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy right now? Also no. Square Enix can do better, and they should do better. And here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below with what you want to see the most out of Square Enix going forward. What have you been heartbroken by? What are you still craving to see? What do you want to see more of? I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And speaking of Square Enix messing up, bro, where's Nier? My favorite game of all time is Nier Automata. And outside of the Replicant reboot remake thing, which was awesome, we got Nier 3 as a mobile gacha game. My pain is eternal. Well, Yoko Taro actually had a few words about this situation. Want to find out more? You should check out this video right here for more. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.